The polls are closed, and now the world waits for an answer. Will Scotland become an independent country? And if it does, what would that new state look like? Stéphane Beaulac is a law professor at Université de Montréal. He joins us now from Edinburgh, Scotland, via Skype. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Where you are closely following the referendum for research here at home. Now, I want to ask you, certainly, if the yes side wins today, the Scottish people wouldn't be waking up to an independent country right away. It'd take a little while. The process would take a while. They'd have to transfer powers, the Constitution, all of that. So how is that going to work?
I mean, there'll be a transition. They've already set a date in the spring of next year, if I'm not mistaken, but in terms of the impact for international recognition purposes, for instance, Scotland would be deemed an independent country already.
It would happen right away.
It would, because that's one of the aspects that I want to emphasize on. There is no doubt whether or not London will recognize an independent Scotland. They agreed that they would if the yes vote wins in the end. So the process was negotiated, and it's one of the things, the main thing, as a matter of fact, I would submit, that distinguishes the Scottish precedent that we're living now and the two experiences that we've had in Quebec. Quebec has always defended its unilateral decision on, to decide the process of a referendum, while in the case of Scotland, they got together shortly after the Edinburgh Accord agreement in the fall of 2012. They agreed on the process, the two main things being the question, which is a 6-word question that can hardly, you cannot come up with a more succinct and clearer question than should Scotland become an independent country.
Exactly.
That also contrasts very much so with the two questions we've had in 1980 and 1995 in Quebec. And also, I mean, the other main aspect of the referendum process is the hurdle. They've decided that 50% plus 1 was going to be enough for Scotland to become an independent country, and on the other hand, for Westminster, London, to recognize the process and ultimately the independence of Scotland.
But here in Quebec, we had a similar kind of situation where if the vote was very close, as it was here in Quebec, afterwards we started to say, is that enough? Is 50 plus 1 enough to push for that mandate? Do you think that we'll see a similar situation in Scotland as well?
I'm rarely, as a lawyer, so direct in an answer, but this time I can say absolutely not. Because that, as I alluded to earlier, in Canada, in Quebec, the feds could essentially argue that they wouldn't recognize an independent Quebec because they were not part of the deciding of the process. In this case, in the case of Scotland, they cannot go back and change the rules. They agreed ex ante, they agreed beforehand, before the whole thing started, that the rules of the game were going to be as follows, and the two main aspects, the question and the hurdle, right? In Quebec, it was decided unilaterally by the National Assembly. Ottawa was never part of deciding on the process, so they had an argument after the fact of saying that I'm not ready to recognize because I never got involved in deciding the process.
It's going to be fascinating to follow. Stéphane Beaulac, I want to thank you for talking with us today. We'll talk to you again soon, I hope.
Okay, my pleasure. Bye now.